The moment my son looked me dead in the eye in front of his girlfriend's entire family and said, "I don't know this man," I felt something inside me go very, very still. Not shattered, not destroyed, still. Like the moment before a storm hits and every living thing goes quiet. I had driven 4 hours from Raleigh to Charlotte that Saturday. My old Chevy pickup, the one with the cracked dashboard and the heater that only works if you hit it twice on the left side. I'd worn my cleanest pair of khakis, a collared shirt I'd ironed myself that morning. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to see my son. I hadn't seen him in nearly 8 months. His name is Vincent. He goes by Vince now ever since he started dating into money. I should back up. My wife, Barbara, passed away when Vincent was 4 years old. Ovarian cancer, caught too late. She was 31. I was 33, working as a facilities manager at a mid-sized manufacturing plant outside Raleigh, making decent money but nothing spectacular. Suddenly, I was a single father with a 4-year-old boy, a mortgage, and a grief so heavy I had to remind myself to breathe some mornings. I didn't have family nearby. My brother was in Portland. Barbara's mother helped when she could, but she was 67 and her knees were bad, so it was mostly me. I packed Vincent's lunch every single day from kindergarten through 12th grade. I went to every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I learned how to French braid hair from a YouTube video because one year he wanted to go to school with a braid like one of his friends. He was 7. I practiced on a mop handle for 2 weeks until I got it right. He never wore the braid. Changed his mind the morning of. But I had it ready. I worked overtime so he could go to football camp the summer before high school. I drove him to SAT prep on Saturday mornings. I co-signed his first apartment when he moved to Charlotte for college. When he graduated, I stood in that stadium and cried so hard the woman next to me handed me a travel pack of Kleenex. I'm not telling you all this to make myself sound like a saint. I made mistakes. I worked too much some years. I wasn't always the most emotionally available father. I was raised in a generation where men didn't talk about their feelings, and I carried that with me longer than I should have. There were times Vincent tried to tell me things and I gave him solutions instead of just listening. I know that now. But I loved that boy. That much was never in question. He got a job in finance after college, started making real money, commissions, bonuses, the whole thing. Moved into a nicer apartment, started dressing differently, started talking differently. The word actually appeared in his sentences with increasing frequency, usually followed by a gentle correction of something I just said. I didn't mind, honestly. I wanted him to do well. I wanted him to have more than I had. Then he met her family. Her name is Courtney. She's fine. Pretty, smart, ambitious. Not the problem. The problem is her father, a man named Warren, who made his money in commercial real estate and has never once in his life let anyone forget it. The kind of man who orders for the whole table without asking, refers to his beach house in the Outer Banks as the cottage with a straight face. Vincent started dating Courtney about 2 years ago. In those 2 years, I watched my son slowly transform into someone I didn't entirely recognize. The changes were small at first. He stopped calling on Sunday evenings like he used to. He'd reschedule our dinners. When we did see each other, he seemed vaguely impatient, like he had somewhere better to be. I told myself it was normal. New relationship, new world, give him space. Then came Warren's birthday party. Courtney's father was turning 65, and they were throwing what I can only describe as an event. 250 guests at a private venue in the Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte. Catered, live jazz quartet. The invitation, which Vincent mentioned almost in passing on a phone call, specified cocktail attire. I asked my son directly, "Do you want me there?" He said, "Of course, Dad. It'll be good for you to meet everyone." So I went. I wore the navy blazer I'd bought for my brother's retirement dinner 3 years ago. It still fit. I shined my shoes. I drove 4 hours on a Saturday. I found parking 6 blocks away and walked because the valet situation looked complicated and I didn't want to make a fuss. I found the venue, gave my name at the door, and went inside. I spotted Vincent across the room almost immediately. He was standing with Courtney and a group of people I didn't know, laughing at something. He looked at ease in a way I hadn't seen in a while. I was glad for it. I made my way over. "Vincent," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. He turned, and in the half-second before his expression settled into something polished and controlled, I saw it, a flash of something I can only describe as panic. He recovered fast. Too fast. "Hey," he said. "Not Dad. Just hey." Warren appeared at his elbow. Courtney's father is a big man, broad-shouldered, the kind of tan you get from a lot of weekends on a boat. He looked at me the way some men look at things they consider beneath their notice. Not with contempt exactly, more like mild inconvenience. "And who's this?" he asked. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. I put out my hand. "I'm Vincent's father, James. Congratulations on your birthday, sir." Warren shook my hand once, brief and firm, and then looked at Vincent with a small, questioning smile. Vincent said nothing. Not a word. The silence stretched 3 seconds. 4. Long enough for Courtney to look sideways at her father, for the woman standing next to Warren to sip her champagne and look at the middle distance. Then Vincent said it. "I don't know this man." He said it quietly, not cruel in volume, just completely flat. Matter of fact, like he was clarifying a seating arrangement. I stood there. Warren's eyebrow went up. He looked at me, then at Vincent, then back at me. Processing. "He must have gotten the wrong party," Vincent continued, still not looking at me. "I'm sorry, I think there's a mix-up." The jazz quartet was playing something soft in the background. Someone nearby laughed at something else. The world kept moving. I did not make a scene. I want to be clear about that. I did not raise my voice. I did not grab his arm. I was 61 years old, and I had spent 37 of those years learning that the moments that matter most require you to be very, very calm. I looked at my son for a long moment. I think some part of me was waiting for him to crack, to say he was joking, to show some flicker of recognition or remorse. There was nothing. "My mistake," I said, to Warren, not to Vincent. And I walked out. I sat in my truck for 40 minutes before I trusted myself to drive. I ate the granola bar I kept in the glove compartment and stared at the street. A couple walked by in cocktail attire laughing. I watched them until they turned the corner. Then I drove home. Vincent did not call that night. He did not call the next morning. He called on Tuesday, around noon. "Hey, Dad." Back to Dad now. "I'd been meaning to reach out. About the party." "Tell me what happened," I said, not angry, just clear. There was a pause. "It's complicated." "Make it uncomplicated." He started talking. It came out in pieces, not a clean confession, more like a man slowly releasing air from a balloon he'd been holding too tight. Warren had apparently made remarks before the party, had told Courtney, who had told Vincent, that his guests were a certain kind of people, that he expected the evening to be refined. Warren had seen a photo of me at some point, the one Vincent had on his phone from our last fishing trip. Me in my worn flannel shirt with a cooler and 2 catfish. Something about the photo had prompted a comment from Warren. Something about wanting the party to feel cohesive. Vincent had convinced himself that if he could just get through the evening without complications, he'd explain everything later. "I was going to introduce you properly," he said. "I just panicked." "You told a room full of strangers that you didn't know me," I said. "Vincent, you told them I was at the wrong party." Silence. "I packed your lunch for 13 years, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact that needed to exist in the air between us. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once. He said Warren didn't understand the context, that Courtney's family was traditional, that there was a lot of pressure he was navigating. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "I need you to understand something. I'm going to take some time. Don't call me for a while. Dad, I'm not ending anything. I just need time. That's all." I hung up. Here's the part I haven't told anyone. What Vincent didn't know, what I had deliberately kept from him for reasons I'll explain, is that 3 years earlier, I had sold the manufacturing plant. Not the job, the plant. For the last 11 years of my time there, I hadn't just been the facilities manager. I'd been a co-owner. When the original owner, a man named Pete, who'd been my boss and eventually my partner, decided to retire in 2019, he offered me the option to buy him out. I'd been putting money away since Barbara died. Quietly, steadily. Not a wealthy man's savings, just a careful man's savings. compounded over decades, supplemented by smart choices and very little luxury spending. I bought Pete out. We ran the plant together for 3 more years. Then a regional manufacturing conglomerate came knocking, and we sold. My share of the sale was just under $4 million. I am not a man who talks about money. I was raised that way, and I still believe in it. You don't tell people what you have because it changes how they see you, and I'd rather be seen for what I am than for what I own. More importantly, and this is the part that will sound strange, I didn't tell Vincent because I'd watched what money did to certain people, and I didn't want him building his life on the assumption of an inheritance. I wanted him to stand up on his own. He had. He'd done it. And then he'd looked me in the eye and told a room full of strangers he didn't know me. I sat with my grief for 6 weeks, went fishing a lot, called my brother in Portland more than I had in years, took long walks, thought about Barbara, about what she would have said. She had always been the one who knew how to hold 2 truths at once. She could love you completely and still tell you hard things. She would have cried about this, and then she would have known exactly what to do. By the end of the 6th week, I knew what I needed to do too. I did not call Vincent. I called Warren. I had found his office number without much trouble. Commercial real estate, Myers Park, not hard to locate. His assistant put me through after I gave my name. "Mr. Harrington," I said, "I don't believe we were properly introduced at your birthday party. My name is James Calloway. I'm Vincent's father." There was a brief pause. "Ah," he said. The tone was cautious, not apologetic. "I'll be brief," I said. "I'm not calling to cause any trouble. I'm calling because I've been informed secondhand that you had concerns about my presence at your event, about whether I fit a certain image." "Mr. Calloway." "I'm not finished," I said. Calm, completely calm. "I want you to know that I understand. You worked hard for what you have. You want your family surrounded by people who reflect that. I respect the impulse, even if I find the execution unfortunate." Silence. "I also want you to know," I continued, "that the man you saw in that photograph, the one in the flannel shirt with the fish, sold a manufacturing operation in 2022 for a sum that would likely surprise you. I don't say that to impress you. I say it because I want you to sit with the fact that you made a judgment and your judgment was wrong. Not about the money. Money isn't the point, but about the kind of man I am." Another silence, longer this time. "My son loves your daughter," I said. "I have no objection to that. But if there is ever another moment where my son is put in a position to choose between your approval and his own father, I want you to know very clearly where I stand and what resources I have available to make that choice easier for him." I wasn't threatening him. I want to be clear about that. I was simply stating a fact, the way you state the weather. Warren said after a long moment, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot." "We did," I agreed. "I hope we can correct that." I hung up. 2 days later, Vincent called me. He was confused, emotional. He'd apparently had a conversation with Warren, the details of which he only learned gradually, and something had shifted. He wanted to see me. We met at a diner halfway between Raleigh and Charlotte, the kind of place with good coffee and laminated menus and a waitress named something like Dolores who calls everyone Han. I was there first. I ordered coffee and waited. When he walked in, he looked tired. He slid into the booth across from me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't know, Dad, about the plant, about any of it." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's not," he stopped, started again. "That's not why I'm here. I'm not here because I found out you have money." "I know that too," I said. "I'm here because what I did was wrong." He said it plainly. No performance, no dramatic speech. Just a tired 30-year-old man saying a true thing. I was ashamed of myself the second I said it. I've been ashamed every day since. The waitress refilled my coffee. We were quiet for a moment. "Do you know what I thought about?" I said, "when I was driving home that night?" He shook his head. "I thought about the mop," I said. He looked at me. "When you were 7, you wanted a French braid." I watched his face shift. "I practiced for 2 weeks on a mop handle. You changed your mind the morning of." And I thought, that's fine. That was always fine. It was never about the braid. He was quiet for a long time. Then his eyes got wet and he looked out the window at the parking lot. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he said. "I know you are," I said. We talked for almost 3 hours. It wasn't all easy. There were things I'd been holding that needed to be said. Things about the past year, the way he'd been slowly stepping away. The Sunday calls that stopped. I told him that I understood the pressure he was under, that I even understood the panic in the moment. What I could not accept and would not accept was silence after. Not from him, not from my son. He nodded. He didn't argue. On the way out, he hugged me in the parking lot for a long time. The kind of hug you give someone when words have run out. I held on. I did not offer him money. I want to be clear about that. I did not make any promises about inheritance or assets. That's not what the conversation was about, and it never will be. If he makes his own life, which he already has, then anything I leave behind someday will simply be a gift, not a foundation. What I offered him was this: a father who is still here, still showing up, still pressing the wrinkles out of a collared shirt on a Saturday morning and driving 4 hours to be in the same room as his son. That is not nothing. Warren and I have spoken twice since. He is not a warm man, but he is not stupid. He treated me differently at the next family dinner, with caution at first, then something closer to genuine respect. He asked me about the manufacturing business. I answered plainly. He did not make me feel like a stranger. Vincent is still with Courtney. I think he's going to propose. I've seen the way he looks at her when she's not watching. I hope she deserves him. I hope he remembers who he is. A few weeks ago, I was going through some old boxes in the spare room. The kind of cleaning you do when the weather turns and you've got nowhere to be. I found a plastic bag with a spool of string and a printed YouTube screenshot. A little faded now, with a step-by-step diagram for a French braid. I'd forgotten I'd kept it. I sat on the floor of that spare room for a good 5 minutes holding that printout. Some things you carry because you have to. Some things you carry because you want to. Because the weight of them feels like proof that something mattered, that you were there, that it was real, that all those ordinary mornings added up to a life. I put the printout back in the box. I think I'll keep it. I keep coming back to the mop. Not the party, not the parking lot, not the 40 minutes I sat in my truck staring at nothing. The mop. The one I practiced French braids on for 2 weeks because a 7-year-old boy wanted something and I didn't know how to give it to him yet, so I learned. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a parent. Most of the job happens in moments nobody ever sees. The Tuesday morning lunches, the SAT drives, the ironing, the mop. You do it because it's right, not because someone's watching, not because there's a reward waiting at the end. You do it because that's what it means to be a decent person. And when you raise a child, you are quietly, constantly teaching them what decency looks like, not with speeches, but with the 10,000 small choices you make when you're tired and nobody's paying attention. I didn't always get it right, I know that. I was too solutions-focused when Vincent needed me to just listen. I worked long hours when I should have been home. I held my emotions at a distance for years because that's what I was taught men do, and it cost us both something real. I own those things. I'll carry them. But what happened at that party was a different kind of failure, and it wasn't mine. Vincent made a choice in that moment. He had maybe 4 seconds, and he chose wrong. Not because he's a bad person, but because he hadn't yet developed the quiet inner steadiness it takes to do the right thing when the right thing costs you something. That kind of steadiness doesn't come automatically. It gets built, slowly, through practice, through watching someone else model it, through getting it wrong and sitting with the discomfort until you understand why it mattered. He's building it now. I can see it. What I've learned, what this whole thing clarified for me, is that character has 3 parts, and you can't fake any of them. The first is knowing right from wrong and choosing right even when it's inconvenient. The second is thinking clearly enough to see past the immediate pressure to what actually matters in the long run. The third is the spine to act on what you know, even when you're scared. Vincent had the first 2 that night. He knew it was wrong. He understood what he was doing. What he didn't have yet, in that moment, was the spine. That's not a condemnation. It's an observation. We all have gaps. The question is whether we close them. I didn't call Warren to prove a point about money. I called him because I wanted him to understand that his assumptions had a cost, and that cost had been paid by my son, who'd been put in an impossible position by a man who thought he could sort people by their truck and their flannel shirt. Warren was wrong, and more importantly, Vincent needed to see that his father didn't just absorb the humiliation quietly and disappear, that there are things worth standing up for. I think that phone call taught Vincent something, not about wealth, about how a man handles the moments when he's been wronged, with calm, with clarity, and without losing himself in the process. The box with the mop diagram is still in the spare room. I don't need to do anything with it. I just like knowing it's there.